Hi, Kim again, and today I want to talk about polarization, the pattern of polarization, because humanity right now is very, very polarized, and that includes me. So, to define polarization, polarization is when we have uh, an opinion that differs from somebody else, and we think we're right and the other person is wrong. So there's black or white or up or down, and we tend to be on one side of the fence. And obviously the polarization that is going on big time at the moment is the vaccine a good thing or not? It's a huge topic, and I've been posting a lot myself on it, and I'm well aware that I'm polarized, and I want to talk about another option beyond polarization. But first of all, to talk about the polarization. So for me personally, I find it difficult to see how it can be right that people, innocent people, are not being informed of what can potentially happen, and that literally, statistically, thousands of people have had severe adverse reactions. I find that difficult to understand that that is okay. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm completely open to being wrong, but that is my stance at the moment. But equally, there are many people who utterly believe it is the right thing, and they've had it and they've been absolutely fine, and are very happy that they have been fine, and they absolutely believe it's the answer. So we have this huge polarization at the moment, and in our Ren Shui Qigong training, we learn about what are called the 10 fundamental patterns of human consciousness. So humanity has many unhealthy patterns of consciousness, which have led them to get us into the situation that we now find ourselves. And there are 10 fundamental patterns, which makes it really helpful to look at those patterns and think, okay, well, which ones apply to me? And we've probably got all of them. I know I've got all of them, but some of them we have to a greater or a lesser extent. And right now, the pattern of polarization is very big in the world at large. Now, many years ago, I heard a saying by Rumi, which says, "Out beyond all ideas of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." And initially I didn't understand what that meant at all. I was like, field? What field? But what he's actually talking about, as I've now begun to understand more, is it's a field of consciousness beyond duality, because polarity is duality. And in personality consciousness, or the fourth kingdom of nature, where most of us are situated in our consciousness, we are in duality, and that is what the yin-yang symbol represents, or it's one of the things that the yin-yang symbol represents. But there are fields of consciousness, or levels of consciousness, awareness, beyond duality, and this is our goal as humans, to ascend, if you like, to those higher levels of consciousness and self-awareness which are beyond duality. And actually what that means is that we're heading towards unity, to unity consciousness, where there is no me or you, or I or you, there is only we. And as far as I understand from what I've been studying for the past 20 years, we're on this journey from personality to unity consciousness, individual to unity consciousness, also sometimes called soul consciousness, because that is where the light of the soul resides, There are many different words to describe the same thing. And one of the keynotes of this unity consciousness is it's about group consciousness. It's not about thinking about ourselves as individuals and selfishness and looking after our own needs. It's about looking after everybody's needs and the group's needs. And this is a huge transition for most of us on the planet, to be thinking of others and the whole before ourselves. So coming back to the out beyond all ideas of right and wrongdoing, there is a field, I'll meet you there. As far as I understand it at this present time, our goal is to reach this level of awareness, of consciousness, and from that place we will see things very, very differently. We will see everything that is going on now in a very, very different light, which we cannot even imagine until we get there. And that's the problem. It's an experiential state where we have a completely different understanding and viewpoint of life that we cannot imagine what it is like until we get there. We may have glimpses of it, so I'll just turn around because the sun's really not good that direction. We may have glimpses of it as we travel up the ladder of self-realization, but it's not until we're really soul infused and in that field that Rumi talks about that we can totally understand what he's talking about, and therefore be in a place of unity rather than duality. And I'm not there yet, but at least I understand that that is the road that we're on, and that is the goal. And that goal is only one step on the ladder of self-realization. There are further goals beyond that, but the first major milestone is this soul consciousness, this reaching this level of unity consciousness. And one of the things that crosses my mind over this whole situation of the 2 and the 4 arguments about the V is it all a big distraction? You know, getting caught up in this, is it right, is it wrong? Are we actually being distracted from what we should really be focusing on, which is putting our attention on working on ourselves and changing ourselves to move towards this state of unity? And this is something that's been very important to me for many years now. It was probably about 17 years ago that I really first started looking into this topic of self-realization, enlightenment, unity consciousness. And back then I didn't believe that it was possible for us mere mortals, most of us, to reach that state in this life. But things are speeding up, and I do believe that we're being called now to really step it up and to work on ourselves, because we're in a crisis which is pushing us to do that. And in the ageless wisdom teachings, it is said that what is happening now is actually a collective initiation process. So as we evolve our levels of self-realization, we go through initiatory processes. And what that really means is that our consciousness expands beyond what it was previously. And technically it expands beyond what is called a ring past knot. And I had a major ring past knot expansion when I was 28, but I didn't know what had happened, and it took me many years to understand what had actually happened. But as we grow and step up the ladder of self-realization, we go through these expansions of consciousness, which are called initiations. And we do this individually. It all has to be done individually. But apparently, according to the ageless wisdom teachings, One of the reasons we're in such a crisis right now is because this is happening collectively, and humanity collectively is going through the first initiatory process. And this is why everything is breaking down, because often when we transform our consciousness, the old has to break down to make way for the new. And that was exactly what I experienced when I was 28, when I was in hospital with what had been diagnosed as a mental breakdown. And that came as a result of severe clinical depression. And I was lying in the hospital, and I just couldn't use my mind at all like I used to use it. I couldn't watch TV, I couldn't read. I was going through a very, very strange process, and I didn't understand anything. And all I knew was that I felt incredibly depressed. And by the way, I'm not saying that all processes are like this. This is just what happened for me. And as I came through it, because I naturally somehow came through it, I started to feel that something had changed in me, but I didn't know what it was. But later, as I pieced things together, and it did take me several years to piece it together, I saw how my consciousness had shifted significantly, and I no longer thought the same way. I no longer believed the same things. And the analogy that I used at the time was that an old building had been knocked down, like they do with these big cranes. They come in and they knock these, huge buildings down, and they have to do that. They bulldoze it. That's the word I'm looking for. They bulldoze it in order to build a new building. And it's quite messy while they're bulldozing it. There's a whole load of rubble on the ground, and initially when the building is being built, it just looks like a mess. It's a construction site. And then all of a sudden one day you're driving past and you see this bright shiny new building standing up from the ground. So that's a little bit like what I liken these transformations of consciousness to, and they can happen in many, many different ways. So yes, I do wonder if we're putting our attention in the wrong direction a lot of the time with this V debate, and maybe it's time to ask ourselves more, what is this whole lesson here? What is the lesson that the universe is trying to give us, that the virus is trying to give us? And let me give you another analogy that will maybe put this into context. For 16 plus years now, I've helped people recover from chronic illnesses, mainly things like chronic fatigue syndrome, post-viral fatigue syndrome, Epstein-Barr virus, fibromyalgia, and a host of other weird sounding conditions which I can't even pronounce. ME, there's another one, myo, I can't remember what that stands for. I know I should know that, but I can't remember it right now. Something encephalomyelitis. So what I discovered on my journey to heal myself from those conditions, and then helping many others, was that the cause of all their symptoms was not the virus itself. And the virus actually came as a gift to help them to heal something which needed to be healed, and to change. They were being asked to change. So the virus came in and sort of took them out, so to speak, but that wasn't and isn't the real cause of the problem. The real cause of their symptoms was the fact that, for example, for a type A personality, that they'd been driving themselves too hard, overworking, not taking care of themselves, seeking approval, not setting boundaries, not speaking their truth, just basically not being their authentic self. And as a consequence of that, breaking what are called the laws of health and the laws of life, and that then bringing damage to themselves without them even knowing it, without me even knowing it when I was doing it. And so the virus came in to their body and took them out, so to speak, so that it could teach them something. But initially we don't see that, we don't understand that. But when people come and work with me, they learn to understand what is the root cause and the message and the meaning in the symptoms. And so once they understood that there was a deeper meaning and purpose to these symptoms and for the virus existing in the first place, then once they made the changes or make the changes, their body restores itself to balance. So we can look at this in the context of what is happening in the bigger picture of what is happening in the world. And as soon as the virus came out, so to speak, on the news last, whatever it was, February, March last year, 2020, I could see immediately that it was a mirror image, if you like, of what is happening for people individually, but it was now happening collectively. So our job perhaps is to ask, why is the virus here? What has it got to teach us? What do we need to learn? What do we need to change? And once we start doing that, and we start making those changes collectively in how we're living our life, how we're treating the planet, how we're treating each other, how we care for each other, once we make the relevant and necessary changes for nature to see that we no longer need that lesson, then potentially the virus could completely disappear by itself. That's just one thought. So those are my musings this morning. Polarity and duality, higher levels of consciousness, lessons in why things happen, and making the necessary changes that we need to make as a collective for us to get out of this mess that we have clearly created for ourselves.